Well, we want Super Pong by Atari.
Yes, but
Super Pong's 4 color games are more fun.
Pinto, a little better idea from Ford.
The 1970s were a wild ride, a bold decade bursting with groovy fashion, daring ideas, and some seriously bizarre product flops. From cars that caught fire to shampoo you could actually eat. Not everything made in the 70s was a success. So what went hilariously wrong? It's Memory Surge. My name is Kevin, and we reveal the 20 items from the 1970s that failed. Let's get to it right after you subscribe, of course. Cube Interactive TV. Before Instagram polls and YouTube comments, there was Cube Interactive TV. This was the first attempt at two-way television, where your responses could be recorded in real time and published on live TV while the show was going on. We still remember the thrill of voting for our favorite shows with the Cube remote, and the excitement of watching the poll stats update every few seconds. Although it was initially successful, the Cube Interactive TV didn't survive beyond 1984, because unlike today, where we have greater data security and privacy, those things didn't exist in the 1970s. Maintaining the systems that kept the live polls going got more expensive, and viewers reduced from the fear that their data could be used against them in the future. The TV's popularity paved the way for modern cable technology, although the interactive part didn't fly for long.
The Rock was also popular in the 70s, not as a prison, but as a pet. That's right, the Pet Rock.
Pet Rock. The very idea seems as insane today as it must have seemed to Gary Dahl when he first thought of it in 1975. And for those of you who don't remember, no, we're not talking about some rocks with special features. Nope, pet rocks were just rocks that were branded to be the perfect pets because you never needed to feed them, bathe them, change their clothes, or any of that stuff that we do for our little puppies and kittens. Pet Rock was a sensational joke that made Gary Dahl over $1 million in sales. But like every bad joke, it became stale with time, and by the following year, the sales had already dropped significantly. Bell Picture Phone. We all remember the Bell Picture Phone, right? The birthplace of modern-day video calls. In the late 1960s, AT&T's Bell Labs created the future. They invested substantial sums of money in the picture phone, believing it to be the future of communication. Sadly, they were both right and wrong. Although they were right in the long term, they were ages ahead of their time. The people of the 1970s didn't see the need for video calls, especially when it occupied too much space and, of course, was just too expensive. Smell-O-Vision revivals. In 1960, Smell-O-Vision was introduced to the cinemas to help improve the experience of movie watchers by giving them a more immersive experience. The idea was to use a system and release a certain scent during a movie so that the viewers would smell what was going on in the movie. But it didn't take long for the vision to be shut down, especially because a competitor, Aromarama, had already received very strong criticisms. Although the idea was nice, the odors released were said to be nauseating, and instead of getting the viewers more into the movie, they had become distracting and borderline annoying. Perhaps if they had tried using a different kind of scent, they would have achieved their aim. But the negative publicity given by Aromarama's critics already served as a strong foothold for the failure of the product.
Instant movies. Polaroid calls it Polavision. Look how simple it is.
Polaroid Polavision. In the late 1970s, the idea of instant home movie systems started gaining ground, but none failed in this field as much as Polaroid's Polavision. Although it was created to be a movie viewer that could develop the film and view it at the same time, the issues that came with it were just too much. The quality of the video produced was very poor in comparison to rival technologies. Also, it didn't help that the device could only record for 2 minutes, needed a large special device to view it, and was incapable of recording audio. The public and even workers in the Polaroid company knew that this device, which was meant to be the company's biggest hit, had become its biggest fail. By 1979, the product was discontinued barely 2 years after hitting the market. Swing bike. In the 70s, swing bikes were an attempt at creating more childhood fun, but they were also an accident waiting to happen. With the ability to steer from both the front wheel and the rear wheel, cyclers were open to more tricks, but without the training for it. Time proved that it was very difficult for everyday cyclers to make use of the new innovation in cycling, and this already reduced its appeal. But the clincher was the difficulties faced in marketing. Ralph Belden and his company found it difficult to market the hard-to-ride bicycle as an everyday means of transportation, and in an era where people sought functionality over leisure, The swing bike couldn't stay in sales for up to 4 years. Betamax. Walking into a department store in 1975 to purchase a home videotape recorder was like getting ready for a gladiators match. There were always two main competitors, Betamax from Sony and VHS. Although Betamax was known for its high image quality and superior sounds, it just couldn't outlast the economy of the late 1970s. In contrast, although VHS was not as good with their image and sound quality, they had more than enough advantages to cover their flaws. VHS was cheaper and Betamax had less recording time than VHS, meaning that VHS could offer more value for a longer period of time. In the end, Betamax couldn't stand the test of time because its competitor was too durable and cheap. Waterbeds for everyone. Waterbeds were one innovation that made everyone joyful. As a kid, you probably had the chance to jump on one for a little bit before mom started shouting. The comfort they brought was phenomenal, with doctors and specialists talking about their potential health benefits like pain relief. However, the flaws soon became too much for that little advantage. Over time, they began to sag, leak, and worst of all, caused more pain for the backaches they were supposed to relieve. Between the long-term disadvantages and how expensive they were to purchase and maintain, waterbeds slowly declined in popularity in the 1990s. Once, waterbeds were everywhere, and now you hardly even hear about them. Laserdisc. Before DVDs and Blu-ray, there was Laserdisc. The Laserdisc was created to be an improvement on the VHS tapes that were available at the time. It was developed as a home video format, but what set it apart was that it used a laser beam to read video and audio, and that made its quality superior to what was available. But this device couldn't stand the test of time, and even before the arrival of DVDs and Blu-ray, it was already declining in use. This was mainly because the people of the 1970s sought comfort, and that was the one thing the Laserdisc couldn't offer. The discs were very large, and there were lots of issues with compatibility because different producers manufactured players with varying image quality. Between the inconvenience of size and its varying quality, everyone just got tired of making use of it. The AMC Pacer. The mid-1970s saw the creation of one of America's greatest car duds, the AMC Pacer. This car had the potential to be a great fit for Americans, but it just didn't know where to fit. From the production to the marketing, things went haywire. After producing the car in 1975, AMC marketed it as the first small, wide car. But that was just the beginning of the confusion because people didn't know where to place it. Was it small? Was it wide? Was it for luxury? Too many uncertainties surrounded the new car, making it unpopular from the start. Beyond this, the cost of production of the car, a staggering $60 million, was nothing to joke about, especially when the purchasers learnt of the drag caused by the weight of the car and the poor fuel economy. Although the car was aesthetically pleasing, the innate development problems were just too much and made the car a dud on arrival. TV teletext services. Teletext was like the internet before the internet. Dads were always super giddy about it because of the amount of information they could get easily without having to wait for the news proper or the papers. Teletext was a digital information service that worked on TVs. It was launched in 1974 in the UK, but quickly gained popularity around the world. In the 1970s, computers were very rare, but the need for information wasn't. Waiting for the 6 p.m. news was a chore too, which added to the appeal of teletext. The service allowed us to keep track of the weather, the new headlines, live scores, and even changes in the stock market and flight times. You can probably figure out why teletext went obsolete with time, right? You could point fingers at the advent of digital television, the internet, and new services from competitor brands. Although before the internet drove away the teletext space, users complained about how difficult it was to navigate. It was still a better alternative to waiting till 6 p.m. for analog news. In some ways, it is still known as the precursor to the modern internet. Tang as a regular drink. 70s kids remember this one. It was on every shelf in every store across almost every neighborhood. Tang was an American brand drink sensation created by William Mitchell and William James. It was very closely tied to the astronaut movement, especially after NASA used it on John Glenn's Mercury flight in 1962. Before then, the sales of the drink were poor and around average. However, as soon as NASA began using it for flights, sales skyrocketed and every kid wanted to have one. The feeling that we were consuming the same things the astronauts took on their flight gave us the warm feeling that maybe one day we too could be astronauts landing on the moon. Nevertheless, as the times passed, the fever for Tang faded away. Although it is still loosely circulated, Tang became associated with an artificial taste and started losing its consumer base. At the same time, there was an increase in competitor brands that could provide better taste, leaving Tang as another drink on the shelf without the large consumer base or cultural phenomenon it once was. The Clarall Hair Lightener Comb. The beauty industry was not left out in the era of innovations. The Clarall Hair Lightener Comb was meant to be the groundbreaking discovery that helped lighten hair by applying a lightening solution to the hair. It helped the ladies get that natural-looking blonde glam. The natural look was gotten by applying the hair lightening solution on the comb before combing the hair. The main task of distributing the solution evenly into the hair was left to comb, creating a uniform look that could easily pass off for a blonde. It was meant to help simplify highlights and make the makeup process quicker, but the results were different from expectation. Instead of evenly distributing the solution, the Clarall hair lightener ruined the hair of multiple ladies by giving them an uneven color. Gerber Singles. Gerber Singles was a failed attempt at both humor and marketing. You know how adults always like to tease around baby food and how nice it is? Well, Gerber was a baby food producing company that decided to help adults take care of their cravings for baby food. Their solution? Pureed peas in a jar. They wanted to create a new market for students and young adults who wouldn't have the time to make a proper breakfast or dinner fix. As you'd expect, the Gerber Singles were taken down from store shelves within a few months of being put up due to very low sales. We feel the marketing team can be held responsible for the product's failure because each campaign was met with hostility. Eventually, it was rejected by the public because consumers thought it was too similar to baby food and could not really pique the interest of their target consumer base. Quadrophonic sound systems. The music industry of the 1970s was set to take leaps with the quadrophonic sound systems. It was an attempt at providing surround sounds to give a more immersive feel to the music and create the right vibe. However, if you were not from a rich household back then, you most likely have no idea that these sound systems existed, or you never had one. Why? They were way too expensive for the average household. Their price, coupled with how complicated it was to set it up, and the fact that people were still more conservative towards music, all matched up together and prevented the quadrophonic sound system from being the hit it was meant to be. But perhaps the greatest challenge was the fact that to enjoy the proper sound after setting up, you needed to have 4 speakers. Even music lovers were not starved enough to go for the option. By the late 1970s, the systems were already in decline. Plastic furniture craze. In the 1970s, furniture was made for more than just sitting. It was also for admiring. Nothing was more admirable than the plastic furniture sets. When these babies first came out, everyone thought man had finally landed on the moon permanently. They looked like they were from the space age. What's more, they were pocket-friendly and could be mass-produced. It was like a match made in heaven for willing consumers and hungry producers. But as you'd expect, not even the trend of space age could beat the marching on of time. With time, people began to replace the word affordable with cheap, and they found the plastic chairs to be tacky. This new view merged with a growing love for natural materials, simpler designs, and the rise of environmental activists, trying to reduce our carbon footprint by limiting the amount of plastic waste available, all jointly led to a decline in the plastic furniture craze. Instant wine kits. The DIY industry of the 1970s took leaps with the invention of the instant wine kits. These kits were stuffed with the basics for wine creation: preserved concentrated grapes, yeast, and some additives. When the first high-quality wine kits emerged in California, it signaled the start of something in the winemaking industry that went on to spread all through the globe. Although most people embraced the option of making wine at home, the initial kits were met with some resistance. People began complaining because the recipe of adding water and waiting for the wine to form created sour and undrinkable juices. While the beginning may have been rocky, wine kits are still pretty popular today and have achieved some measure of success. Guess you can say harsh beginnings don't always mean a fatal ending. Pong consoles flooding the market. If you were a gamer in the 1970s, you probably remember the Pong consoles. Pong was one of the first successful video games that was adapted into a home console for players to enjoy the feel of video game tennis. However, Pong's absolute control over the market was short-lived, and it was due to no personal fault. In 1977, numerous companies jumped on the Pong bandwagon by producing cheap knockoffs of the same game consoles. While they copied the idea, these companies did not do much to innovate on the concept. and so the market became oversaturated with the same idea. The company Atari, seeing the saturation, ideated with the creation of programmable consoles like the Atari 2600. With newer programmable consoles, consumer interest in Pong consoles declined, and that's what led to their eventual crash. Downey Flake toaster eggs. Another innovation of the 1970s was the creation of eggs for toasters. Downey Flake toaster eggs were frozen pre-cooked eggs that could be reheated in the toaster. This idea was simple and was created to help reduce the time required to make a breakfast fix, but everyone began to complain about the texture of the eggs. After toasting, they felt rubbery and had a very weird feel in the mouth. As a result, many consumers rejected the products and stayed with the familiar yet friendly regular eggs. Without a growing client base, Downey Flake toaster eggs lived their short life on the shelf and were shelved for good. Ford Pinto. Ford vehicles were a household name in the 1970s, but not all of their cars were successful. The Ford Pinto was one of such cars. In the 1970s, when it was manufactured, it was hailed as a very compact and affordable car, able to compete with the likes of the Volkswagen. However, the hails soon turned to wails, and a call for much-needed scrutiny of the product due to repeated rear-end fires. Exploding tanks caused the fires due to a design flaw. The producers had placed the fuel tank very close to the rear axle, making it easy to rupture at low speeds. In the end, the car led to numerous losses for the company as it became the subject of many litigations. Thanks to the litigations, the explosions, and the backlash from the public, the Ford Pinto was put down for good and sent back to the factories for remodeling. Do you remember any items that were popular in the 1970s that we missed? Or do you still feel some of these items didn't fail? We'd love to hear from you, so let us know in the comments. Until next time.